continued discussion of the previous discussions regarding school safety and violence in respect to school behavior management with Superintendent Dr. Tremblay and the School Committee Chair Jessica Barnhill. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to let you begin, Chair Barnhill, and say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for inviting me. My name is Jessica Barnhill. I'm also District 8 representative. In 2010, I chose to buy my home in South Framingham.
God bless you.
God bless you. I have a young child in the Framingham public school system, and this August I'm starting my 20th year as a public school teacher at the high school level. I'm so thankful to have such passionate, committed members of passionate, committed people on the school committee who I get to work with and do this important work for our most important constituents, our school children. It's an honor to work with them. The City Council has raised a really important topic, if not the most important topic, our student safety. Violence in our schools is not okay. Violence in our community is not okay. It's not okay for our school children to get physical. I'm looking forward to this conversation tonight and this discussion tonight, and I'm looking forward to a solutions-based approach that will help us partner together so we can eliminate violence in our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tremblay.
Thank you, Ms. Barnhill, and to the City Council, Mr. Chairman, and to members of the school committee who are joining this evening. I think, while it can be confusing to have school matters before the City Council a couple of times now, I think there's a great benefit in the fact that we're doing this. Because it raises the awareness that it is a community matter to be addressed. It's not something that the schools in 6 hours in a school day can address in that time. So I provided responses. Thank you, by the way, for the members of the City Council who provided questions in advance, took time to respond to all of those. Ms. Bryant, particular shout out for you for all 15 of your questions. So thank you for those.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
And I just provided the updates again and all through until I think about Friday or until Monday. And so I provided the update. Members of the City Council may not have had a chance to read that communication yet. It's about 12 pages in length, so I don't expect you've read it tonight. So I want to just talk about some of the salient points, the high-level questions that have come up, and where I think, as the chair, Madam Chair, has spoken about a collaborative solution going forward together. I'm a very practical guy. I live in the land of policies and laws that govern things, but I don't think it's going to be worth a lengthy agenda tonight to talk about the details of Chapter 37H and H1/2 and H3/4, what those means, what the restrictions are, or what happened with COVID and why can't we bounce back. I mean, these are all things we can discover. But I think taking a very practical matter, there's two things in my mind that come at hand. One is, what's going on with school violence or violence in our schools and on the buses, and why don't we know about it? And then ultimately, what are we doing about it, and how can we be more proactive? They're sort of interrelated, but they're somewhat separate. Well, the first thing is we sort of work in a land of protected individuals, of minors in school. So we can't always share things as a school department. I do think that we can improve our communication, and I want to provide this as a possible remedy this evening. One of the challenges is we have people who will post on social media, as you know, with videos and all the things that get to your inboxes. And we have this sort of bifurcated approach where families are sending things to city councilors, to school committee, wherever it's emerging, but it's not necessarily in the places where we can resolve the problems, right? So we need to improve our communication across city offices, officials. We used to have, back at one point when I came to the district, a convening of city youth leaders and faith leaders and healthcare leaders and school department and police, and we would have robust conversations with our SROs about students, and it felt like at the time there was a community coming together in support of students and families. And I feel that doesn't exist right now in the same way that it did. And I think that's an area where one of the council questions that was asked was what can the city council do? And I think there's an area there where there can be at no cost to the community. It becomes a conversation aimed at solution-seeking opportunities. I think one area of communication, that why did this happen? Why don't we know about it? And we don't have to go through the details of the bus videos and all the things that you already are aware of. But again, a lot of times we can't and don't share that information. That's not to hide information from anybody. That's not to say that these bad things don't happen, because they do. The risk of communicating, and I think this is where we do need to go, is the perception can become the reality that you continue to communicate with us if we were to go this track of saying, this happened. Let's take a bus issue, for example. Let's just pick a bus X. That a fight happens, the driver is driving there. We come to a place of blame quickly. What was the driver doing? Did the driver pull over? Where was the monitor? Why did the students behave? Why are they out of their seats? The list of questions goes on, but ultimately we have to dial that back. How do we fix that problem? So we can say, well, why don't we just take the badly behaved student who was the aggressor, punching another student, off the bus? So we can. And while people look at the Code of Character, Conduct, and Support, we call the code, as this sort of soft, kids don't need discipline, they need a hug mindset, I think both are true, frankly. I think kids need hugs, and they also need concrete consequences for actions. These behaviors we see in school that we've talked about, that have come to your inboxes, that we've been discussing at length, are not okay. But we have limitations on how we address those within the law. So some will argue, well, we have very liberal or moderate interpretations of that. So we have the highest, Framingham has the highest, as I provided in the document, the highest suspension rate of students in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, greater than Boston. That's a problem for us. But yet there's a perception that we are not doing enough disciplinary action. And arguably, suspension isn't the answer, because when students aren't in school, where are they? They might be at home. They might be having supervised visits at home. They might be in the community. They might be doing who knows what. But we know it's not learning, and we know it's not coming to school. And then the state will look at chronic absenteeism, which is a factor in communities about the success of schools as they're assessed. The quality of school districts are rated on absenteeism, whether students come to school or not. So, by the way, when you have a situation like this, say a suspension from school, the student may be suspended. So what's the measure there? The student's out of school, sort of out of sight, out of mind. The problem is removed. But under the law, we are required to provide an education to that child at home, through a tutor, whatever it may be, and they return back to school. So the suspension, when it's done well, and it's necessary at times, and there are provisions in the code that allow for suspensions, but it is time for the school staff to come apart from the challenge in front of them and problem solve, to put in a safety plan in place, to look at other considerations. That's the benefit of a suspension. In-school suspension, which we're doing much more of now, is a way for students to still go to school, still continue to learn, and have time for a restorative conversation, right? So ultimately, we want to have our kids grow up to be human beings that can negotiate conflict. They're going to get to a point when they leave school where they can't just be put off by somewhere. We need our students to have those skill sets where they can manage a relationship with their boss that is not good. If they're unhappy, they can't just hit the boss. They'll get fired. So these are things that these are life skills that we have to address, but it's not going to happen it can't only be expected that it happens in a 6-hour school day. So I think we need to, upon a lot of reflection, and since the last time I came to you in February, we've looked at the time it was at the high school largely, but there was other issues at the schools, as you know. We called the state in. I reached out to the commissioner of elementary secondary education, and I had Anne Marie Strynak came out and visited our school with a team to look at what we're doing. And the concern was like, hey, are we behaving like Brockton here? Do we have a situation? She said, absolutely not. They had an assessment of our high school, a walkthrough. It wasn't a formal assessment. It wasn't a formal report. It was a sort of day in the life, see what you see and tell us how we can do better. One of the areas was a specific, and I'm not going to name the program, it was a specific program at the high school where we had a number of our student issues that had emerged. That program, talking with Principal Mark Albright and with the staff there and with our special education team and others on our school district level team about moving that program to a different location of the high school that would allow us to have more controlled access to that when students are having challenging days or unskillful behavior. It's not being manifested in the hallways and creating a bigger spectacle. And so we got the Department of Elementary Secondary Education came out, did a review of our proposal, and we've since now have moved that program. So there's an example. I didn't include that in this particular memo, but there's an example of let's look at the situation, let's assess it, and let's just try to see how we can problem solve that. If we can provide increased communication, say on a bus issue, and this is going back to the earlier point, say on bus X, and a student, We absolutely can and should be letting all the families on that bus know. We had an incident today on bus 7. We don't condone the behavior, and in fact, this behavior is unacceptable and runs counter to our core values as a school community. We need you to have a conversation, you, the families, the caregivers, to have a conversation with your child about what happened on the bus and list families as partners in this work. Now, that doesn't excuse the behavior. We still need to consequence the behavior. But what's happening, I believe, is a sense that the Code of Character and Conduct and Support doesn't have any leverage for consequences. That is not true. The school department is doing nothing about disciplinary action for behaviors in school or aggressive behaviors. Not true, because we have the data that's been submitted to the state, which I provided to you, that shows a year-over-year increase and the highest number of suspensions. So we have to go back to the second part of my earlier point. There's the perception of what is being done, why don't we know about it? Well, not everybody's entitled to know all things all the time. Yet people will still post to social media with their own narrative. We see it all the time. So we can't just dismiss the fact that, so we don't live in a land of secrets. Everybody knows everything. But what happens is people create their own narrative when they don't have enough information. But the struggle is we can only provide so much information, because if we do, it's a violation of students' privacy rights. So all these things I'm touching on in a very practical way are cited in general law and in FERPA, the Educational Rights Protections Act, right? So but it's a practical matter. What can we do? Because we're in a constant point of reaction. We're always reacting to the situation. More campus aides, more counselors, adding more bus monitors. These things all come at a price. This is a cost to doing business by adding that level of support. And at some point, we're going to get to every child has an adult one-on-one, and we cannot be in that position. That is not sustainable financially, nor is it in the best interest of our students and families and our staff. To be clear, we also have another challenge, right? So when a student, let's say 2 students are in the hallway, we're not seeing evidence that these are random acts. Kid walks in the hallway, gets shoved against lockers or pushed to the floor. That might happen. Again, I don't want my comments to sound flippant or that I'm dismissing the severity of it. None of these things are okay. I'm giving you a concrete, practical example, things we could all relate to when we were in school probably. Kid gets knocked down. So was it a manifestation of bullying? Has this been an ongoing situation? We have to look into that. Principals do. There's very specific guidelines of what principals have to do, how they communicate with families. And for the most part, families want to enlist with us as partners in this work. How can my child be safe at school? How can I keep, I'm so sorry for what happened. Most people do own that. Most, not all. We also struggle with some of our caregivers who are very reluctant partners. And that's a challenge that we're going to have to deal with and we'll continue to deal with on the school administration side. But I think if we can widen the scope of our community to enlist our families as knowing, hey, we can't tell you all the details of what happened today. There's an incident on the bus. Talk to your child. That's going to give a perception that the place has come unraveled and that we have it is chaos. So there's a concern that I have front of mind about that. But at the same time, if we can increase communication such that we have the community as an enlisted partner, then we can do something more about raising awareness so there's not a perception of things are being hidden from us, that things are really wide out in the open. And so if an incident that it happens and then 2 months later a video is released, someone with the wherewithal could say, oh yeah, I remember the school communicated with us or the bus driver communicated with us about that incident. I didn't see the video and it's unfortunate that was taken and shared because there's a re-traumatization that happens, by the way, when that happens too to that child and that family, even though in the matter that you know that I'm referencing was already brought to resolve, disciplinary and healing with that family, which was all researched in 2 months later when that came to bear, right? So the question is, are we doing things to address the behaviors in school and on the bus? Yes, we are. Are we doing enough? Probably not, and not with fidelity or consistency, and that's an area that I take responsibility for that I'll address with our leadership team. And can we better communicate with our community and with others to the extent that it matters? Because it's not about anybody in this room necessarily needing to know what child and what happened to them. There's this need to know mindset. But it is important that the community know that the school district is aware of it, we're not afraid to tell you about it, and we're going to deal with it. And by the way, we need you to have the conversation at home to the extent families will engage to say, this is not okay. When you see it, say something. When you see these behaviors happening, this is the point about the upstanding communication that I had sent earlier. So that's my opening remarks on reflections. There may be specific member questions. Again, I don't know what the intent is of the City Council this evening to go through these things item for item for 12 pages. We'll be here until tomorrow. Happy to do that if that's the wish of the council.